Most people believe prisons are designed to punish. Some believe they are designed to rehabilitate. Both of these beliefs miss what prisons actually do. A prison is not a place where people are sent to suffer and then return. It is a system specifically engineered to alter the way a person experiences themselves. And the alterations, in most cases, do not reverse when the sentence ends. In 1971, psychologist Philip Zimbardo conducted what became known as the Stanford prison experiment. 24 college students, randomly assigned. Half became guards, half became prisoners. The experiment was scheduled to last 2 weeks. It had to be stopped after 6 days. The guards had begun to psychologically torture the prisoners, not because they were cruel people, because the architecture of the situation made cruelty the path of least resistance. But Zimbardo's experiment, as disturbing as it was, only captured the beginning of what prisons do. The acute phase, the part that happens in days. What researchers have since documented is what happens in months, in years, in decades. The first thing a prison removes is choice. Not dramatically. Every choice. What to eat, when to sleep, when to speak, when to move, becomes a decision made by someone else. This seems manageable at first. It is not manageable. Psychologists who study institutional environments call this process learned helplessness, a term first developed by Martin Seligman in 1967 through experiments on dogs exposed to inescapable electric shocks. The dogs that could not escape the shocks eventually stopped trying, even when escape became possible. They had learned that their actions had no effect on their environment. And once that lesson is learned, it generalizes. It generalizes to situations where escape is possible, to situations where choice exists, to the entire relationship between the self and the concept of agency. The person stops believing that what they do changes anything. In a prison environment where choices are systematically removed for years, this is not a side effect. It is the primary psychological output of the system. The second thing a prison removes is identity. Again, not dramatically. On entry, a number replaces a name. Clothing is standardized. Personal objects are confiscated. The markers that told the person who they were in relation to their family, their work, their community, are systematically removed. What replaces them is the identity of the institution. Prisoner, inmate, number. These are not just labels. In environments of total control, labels become the architecture of self. Irving Goffman, the sociologist who studied what he called total institutions, documented this process in 1961. He called it Mortification of Self, the systematic stripping of the personal identity and its replacement by an institutional one. He found it in prisons, in psychiatric hospitals, in military boot camps, in monasteries. The same process, different uniforms.
But what distinguishes prisons from most other total institutions is the duration. A military recruit emerges from boot camp with a new identity, but also with a community, a purpose, a structured future. A person released from a 10-year sentence emerges with an institutional identity and nothing to attach it to. The institution that defined them is gone, but the self that existed before it is also gone. Researchers call this the re-entry problem. But re-entry implies there is somewhere to return to. For many people, after long sentences, there is not. The community changed. The family changed. The world changed. And the person standing at the gate is not the person who walked in.
The third thing a prison removes, and the least discussed, is the capacity for solitude. This requires explanation. Solitude, genuine solitude, is the experience of being alone with oneself and finding that bearable. It requires a stable sense of self, a relationship with one's own thoughts that does not generate unbearable anxiety. Prison does not provide solitude. It provides isolation. These are not the same thing.
In a prison environment, a person is almost never alone. They are surrounded by people in conditions of chronic stress, deprivation, and threat. The nervous system learns over months and years that other people are a source of danger. Not sometimes, always.
When that person is released and returns to environments where other people are not a source of danger, the nervous system does not immediately update. It cannot. The learning is too deep, too long, too consistently reinforced. Craig Haney, one of the leading researchers on the psychological effects of imprisonment, published findings in 2003 documenting what he called the post-incarceration syndrome, a cluster of psychological adaptations: hypervigilance, institutionalized helplessness, social withdrawal, difficulty with unstructured time that persist long after release. In some cases, for the rest of a person's life. The sentence ends on paper. The prison does not.
There is a phenomenon documented in long-term prisoners that researchers find difficult to discuss clinically. Some prisoners, after many years, begin to prefer incarceration to release. Not because prison is comfortable, because the self that exists inside the institution has become more real to them than any self they can imagine outside it. The institution has become the only environment in which they know who they are. Release, which should be freedom, becomes its own form of terror.
In 1994, after spending 50 years in prison, a man named Charles Woodard was released. He had entered at 19. He was 69 years old when he walked out. In the interview he gave 3 days after his release, he said something that prison researchers have returned to repeatedly. He said, "I know how to be in there. Out here, I don't know what I am."
The design of a prison is not accidental. The removal of choice is not accidental. The removal of identity is not accidental. The conditions that produce learned helplessness, that make re-entry feel like exile, that turn freedom into terror, are not side effects. They are outputs. The question that prison researchers have spent decades trying to answer is not how to fix these outcomes. It is something more fundamental. Whether a system that produces them was ever designed to do anything else.